does one define transhumanism?
When I woke up this morning, it was a bit late, but I didn't care, so I just went ahead and prepared myself. Then I looked at the mirror, my eyes.
For me, it's about how do we transcend some of our limitations of our biology and limitations of our physical biology using science and technology. So transhumanism, I think, is a movement all around the world of people that want to apply this science and technology and accelerate the initiatives in using science and technology to end the aging process. So we call that super longevity. How do we use science and technology to extend our healthy human lifespans? So not just living longer and older for old sake, but for keeping our health as we are continuing as in our youth. And the other pillar is how do we use science and technology to enhance our intelligence? And that's in super intelligence, looking at how do we stay relevant in the age of artificial intelligence and robotics, essentially replacing what humans do. How do we stay competitive against that sort of automation transition? And so merging with AI is sort of the super intelligence side of transhumanism. And then finally, there's super well-being. So there's no point just being smart or healthy. You also want to be mentally well so that you're still pursuing a purpose, sort of in line with our human values. And so if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, how we can attribute all these human needs to stay well, and super well-being essentially tries to use science and technology to fill in all of those missing pieces in Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
How did you come out to this field?
Well, me, it was through just some desktop research when I was doing at work. I used to work with this organization at Deloitte called the Center for the Edge, and they're essentially looking at what's should be on the corporate radar from the next 5 to 10 years. And I was researching artificial intelligence, and I came across the team at Singularity University, Ray Kurzweil, essentially predicting that in 2045 that there will be this technological singularity where AI is essentially going to be accelerating faster than anyone can actually comprehend. So that's the sort of technological singularity concept. And when I read more about what Ray Kurzweil talks about and other things he's researching in, it's to do with the longevity side. He's taking a lot of sort of different medications and supplements to try to live long enough. He thinks that it'll reach a point where he gets longevity escape velocity. So I think Aubrey de Grey, you might have heard them talk, are essentially trying to extend an extra day for every day that they live and longer. And that way they have that escape velocity for longevity. And so that's a sort of when I came across into transhumanism. And at the time when I got involved in 2015, Zoltan Isvan was running for president in the US. And I heard about this guy that was driving around in a coffin bus and essentially trying to promote this issue of transhumanism and the fact that every single day there's over 100,000 people dying all around the world due to the aging process. And so that was a sort of real wake-up call for me. And I thought if someone could do it in the States with a minimal budget to drive around a bus that's shaped in a coffin, we can do this here in Australia as well by teaming up with people that are in the science and technology field. How do we use then these technologists and political parties to drive this transhumanist movement forward in Australia?
What does Singularity University do?
Well, Singularity University, it's not really a university in the traditional sense. So it's not something that you would join after high school. It's something for continuous education for corporate leaders. So their target market is the people that are in high positions in organizations around the world who want to make a big impact and create a positive impact for humanity. And they're also targeting founders of startups who want to make that positive impact for over 1 billion people. So Singularity University essentially run technology summits, educational workshops, programs online
Mm-hmm.
courses as well as startup accelerators to try to accelerate towards the singularity. So all these science and technology initiatives, they're trying to drive forward these initiatives and accelerate them by putting together all the real sort of relevant people around the world, whether it's the corporate leaders that then can pass on that message to their employees, or the founders that might steer their organizations towards positive impact and scaling to 1 billion people. And also for anyone really technologists to come together at these summits and online events to essentially share their
Mm-hmm.
ideas and collaborate. So it's really that sort of ecosystem play. And I see a strong alignment with the transhumanist movement because they're essentially trying to achieve a lot of the same things, whether it's extending our healthy human lifespan. Peter D. Mandis is the founder of Singularity University with Ray Kurzweil, and Peter D. Mandis runs
Mm-hmm.
things like Human Longevity Inc., which is essentially trying to extend the human lifespan so that we know everything about our bodies, whether it's we might
Mm-hmm.
have a particular cancer because we haven't done the testing all around our bodies, or whether we can look at technologies like CRISPR to do gene editing to change our biology so that it doesn't have this sort of weaknesses, susceptibility to the aging process. So yeah, a lot of these initiatives really aligned with what Singularity University is doing with transhumanism, and especially what they're trying to achieve with, bringing about positive impact for all around the world. It's essentially aligned with the
Mm-hmm.
United Nations sustainability goals, and that's exactly what sort of the transhumanism concept of well-being is trying to eliminate poverty, ensure that everyone gets food, water, shelter, access to
Mm-hmm.
clean infrastructure and resources, and then they can actually look at the higher level concepts of well-being. That's essentially promoting connection, social acceptance, and also achieve the sort of self-actualization and transcendence that's in the Maslow.
So, how transhumanist technologies will change everything?
Yeah, I mean, let's start with, say, in the longevity field. If we think about the aging process,
Mm-hmm.
traditionally, if you ask someone on the street, what do they think about aging? They would say it's a natural part of life. They would say, you're born, you grow up, you might have some kids, and they might have some kids as well, and you're meant to just grow old and pass away. But essentially,
Mm-hmm.
what the science is doing right now is challenging that narrative because their research is showing that there are certain compounds and certain techniques that you can do on mice to extend their healthy lifespan. Because mice usually live about 2 years, and when the research is done through certain compounds like NAD, which is a precursor to, essentially a coenzyme in our bodies that repairs the cellular process. And so that's extended the healthy lifespan of mice by 30%. And so they think that given we share a lot of the genetic code with mice, given that we're all mammals, essentially we potentially could apply that to humans. And they're doing human trials now on that particular drug. The different transhumanist technologies would be, say, that those different compounds, but using AI to discover new drugs in aiding the research into aging, but also techniques like CRISPR gene editing, which is essentially like the cut and paste tool of everything, the book of life, right? The book of every single individual has a unique book, and these books are made out of letters, the 4 letters in the DNA, so the A, C, T, and G, and these
Mm-hmm.
especially spells out movies like Gattaca. You might have seen in the future in sci-fi movies where they edit the genes to ensure they have special skills, whether it's having
Yeah.
super blue eyes or blonde hair, but also higher intelligence to be able to fit those roles of the future. So that's a really exciting part of a transhumanist technology that would change what it means to be human, because we're no longer randomly selecting these different combinations of the parents' genes. We're now selecting ones that we think that could have particular measures, and it brings about a lot of ethical challenges. But I think over time we'll find that it might be morally better to be able to choose for our future generations to be able to live healthier, longer, more intelligent. Because to deny them that option, or I guess deny them that ability, would also be
Mm-hmm.
morally apprehensible too. And then transhumanist technologies, like I said, with AI, we're seeing that AI is accelerating at a pace that's about 10 times faster than Moore's law. Moore's law is essentially saying, the
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
computational power and the price of computation should essentially, the price of computation should be halving, and then the computational power should be doubling every 18 months or so. But with AI, the number of computation it's using to train these algorithms is actually doing it at 5 times Moore's law. And also the cost of training this is also halving at about every 2 months. So essentially we're seeing this exponential reduction of cost and exponential growth of computation and the ability to essentially do a lot of different things with AI now. And the pace that it's increasing in improvement can be demonstrated by the recent work by OpenAI. So OpenAI is a company that was founded by Elon Musk and Sam Altman from in Silicon Valley. Sam Altman worked on Y Combinator. A lot of startups went through Y Combinator. So these two guys essentially worked on how to create an open source artificial intelligence research organization, and essentially started off as a non-profit. But last year, Microsoft invested $1 billion into the for-profit arm of OpenAI, and that allowed them to use Microsoft's computational power, the computer servers on Azure that they have, to essentially run a lot of these models and train them at a rate that's much better than if they were just doing it on their own. And I think Amazon's doing the same, Google's doing the same, and all these tech companies are powering AI with cloud computing. And with OpenAI, they've just created this particular tool called GPT-3. So it stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformers. So it's essentially an advanced version of the deep learning algorithms that they're able to do. And GPT-3 is able to generate software code by just typing in natural language of what you want the software to do. And so this actually means that, if you want to create let's say a code that creates a digital wallet for you, a user interface using React software code, you just type in create a button that adds money in my account and create a button that subtracts money in my account. It's a very basic tool, but you can type that in natural language and the code is generated for you in React. And because it's trained on websites like GitHub, and GitHub has all the code that's done by other people in various languages. And when it's trained on React, it can learn from that. And then based on your comments, it actually understands what you're trying to generate. And so it does that automatically, which is really surprising to the community. And, there's been a lot of surprises recently with what DeepMind has done from Google, beating the Go champion. So that's just shown that, something that wasn't expected for another 10 years is happening now. And so that pace of acceleration and in the innovation in AI in transhumanist technologies means that we're actually surprising people, and the future essentially coming faster than we think.
Can a machine have a human brain?
I think what we'll see first is a merger of human brain and the machine, which means that the machine will have a human brain. This is an example through Neuralink, and Neuralink is the brain-computer interface. And so if you think about, rather than creating an artificial brain, where we could just connect our brain to AI, to the cloud, and create a merger of this artificial brain using a human brain. And it's essentially a tiny chip made up of tiny little hair wires, right? So these are about a quarter of the length of a human hair. And essentially that gets implanted in your head using a robotic surgeon, right? You don't want a normal surgeon to do it because it's really small, really hard for them to manipulate. And because it's the brain, you don't want to make any mistakes. The brain has lots of different blood cells as well, so you don't want to hit the blood cells. So the robotic surgeon is able to sort of scan to make sure it's not hitting at the blood cells and implant these really tiny wires, which essentially are electrodes. So the electrodes can send signals to your brain, and that means that it can also receive signals from the brain. And essentially what happens in our neurons, in our brains, are essentially always sending electrical signals, and these wires will be able to read those electrical signals to understand what you're thinking. And through that, you're able to think, and the machine can do things for you. Say if you have lock-in syndrome, or if you're a quadriplegic, you can use these devices to control a robotic arm, or to browse the internet and communicate to the outside world. So it's a real benefit for people that have those sort of current preconditions. But what we're seeing is that they're understanding how human brains what it's doing by using AI machine learning and deep learning. So these deep neural networks are being trained by real neural networks in the human brain. So humans are training the AI by the AI seeing what the humans are doing in the brain, and therefore it could create a copy of the human brain using an artificial synthetic neural network. So essentially what we could see is you can create an artificial human brain by just copying exactly what happens in the brain. It's within the realm of physics. It's possible.
Yeah.
It's really just a matter of when and how fast we can accelerate that to make it happen.
Yeah. Oh, this is mind blowing.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Just make sure. Wise.
Yeah. Is there are some limitation on transhumanism when it comes to values?
Yeah, there's I think transhumanism has had a bad rap from an ethical perspective, just because it's a movement that doesn't really have a central, I guess, authority. It's very distributed in the way that the movement is organized, and we have transhumanist parties, political parties all around the world. The most popular one would be the one in the US, that's run by Gennady. And Gennady, I think, essentially they have a very well-run party, lots of organizers, but they ensure that the transhumanist movement is not sort of twisted or sort of been overtaken by really extreme sort of views. The extreme views would be, the risk is that when you're using science and technology to modify the human, that's, almost repeating like what happened in World War II with the Nazis. So eugenics is something that a lot of people really want to avoid. And so the ethical debates, transhumanists as a movement should bring out the ethical debate ahead of the actual implementation. So by bringing these ideas and concepts and the research that's actually done to the public, we can actually debate what should and shouldn't be done. And we need to do that as soon as possible because the technology is outpacing the ethical debates, as it usually does. But in this example, with AI and also in the biotechnologies that's happening out there, it is accelerating at the rate of Moore's law and faster than that because it's become an information technology. So the US Transhumanist Party, there's Humanity Plus as well. It's an organization run by Natasha Vidamore and Max Moore, who run the cryogenics lab. So there's a lot of sort of fringe parts of the scientific bodies that we need real sort of validation by many scientists. Like we need to adhere the scientific method if we're able to be taken legitimately. And so the challenge would be to make sure that transhumanist movement, is sort of aligning together as one movement. And that's a sort of a real challenge recently.
Yeah, because we have this kind of we started with this, how you call it, 10 commandments of God. So we follow it and we know that you should never kill a human. We know that it's forbidden. So when it comes to AI, it's a good idea, really a good idea to have our limitations. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, with AI
Yeah.
for sure. And it's really hard to define for AI what are the moral values of humanity for the AI to appreciate, because our morals are always evolving. Like if you compare us to say 100 years ago, our morals are very different, let alone say the next 100 years. So the AI will need to adapt to our changing morals as well. And the best way that some of the thought leaders out there are thinking of doing it is by, either merging with AI or having AI essentially democratized so that it reacts and interacts with all the other humans as well around the world. And this is done by an example, the Singularity Net. So it's run by Ben Goetzel, and they essentially have a marketplace where anyone can contribute different AI modules to the marketplace, kind of like an app store for AI. And you could, if you're an AI developer and you develop a really cool piece of algorithm, you could submit it onto Singularity Net, and you'll be monetized based on how many people use it. So people will pay to use it each time as an API. But it's using tokenomics, so distributed ledger technology to ensure that that transparency of how the algorithms work and also how it's been decentralized. Because the challenge is that if we have a lot of these centralized AIs happening in big tech, so whether it's Google or Microsoft or Facebook and Amazon, and in China as well, it's going to be very centralized in the big tech companies, whether it's Alibaba or Baidu or Tencent. The challenge is that not everyone will have a say in how the AI is trained. It'll only be the developers in those big tech companies. Whereas with the AI marketplace and Singularity Net, it'll be based on contributions for a lot more people around the world, and it'll be accessed in a democratized way as well. So no more black boxes and potential for malicious AI to be developed in these black boxes in tech companies around the world. That's the challenge, really.
So is it possible for humans to have mortal bodies?
I think so. It's within the realm of physics. So immortality is probably like a not the perfect word, because you could always potentially get disconnected by the cloud servers, right? So you could potentially, just get destroyed. So that's not really immortality. It's not, within the realm of physics, there's always the potential for destruction. So, and also for entropy to happen, but it's probably more indefinite lifespan. So indefinite, you can continue to exist indefinitely until something, disconnects you for some reason. And so if you're able to say, for example, connect to a neural link using the neural link example, and you have a copy of yourself in real time, so you're in sync with a cloud version of you, and it continues to back you up every second, every microsecond. And so let's use a thought experiment. So you're connecting to a neural link, and they slowly create synthetic neurons that essentially are connected to your real neurons, your actual neurons. And during this process, they're migrating more and more of your memories and your thoughts and your current sort of different firings into this cloud-based synthetic neuron. And it's continuing to do that. So maybe it starts off by doing 10% of your brain and puts it into the cloud, and you can still feel it. You're still awake and you're still feeling this happen. And you're like, okay, yeah, it's happening. I'm fine. I'm perfectly fine. I'm thinking like myself. I'm still me. And then it goes to 20%, and you're like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. It's so good. Still feeling fine. And then it goes to 40%, and then 80%, and then at 99%, you're like, oh yeah, it still feels like me. I've got 1% of my physical brain, but 99% is in the cloud. I'm still awake and conscious and talking like I normally do. And then when it goes to 100%, you don't feel a difference. So when that happens, you become completely synthetic on the cloud, and provided they give you the same sort of a physical body, so you don't feel weird, or they mimic it in virtual reality, so you feel like you're in virtual reality and you can't tell the difference, then that's a perfect sort of emulation of you, but also it's transitioned you while you were conscious to the synthetic version of you. And so that'll help you achieve at least physical, like virtualization from your physical self. And once you're virtualized, you become digital. It means that you could continue on to exist indefinitely until the power gets cut on the server, right? If someone trips over the power and become disconnected and everything's deleted, and you're like, well, that wasn't immortality. So that if you could continue to keep empowered and then continue to carry out, and you become in any physical form in virtual reality or put into a robot avatar, there's a sort of where the future is possible from a physics perspective. It just needs to be. It's an engineering problem. It's an engineering challenge to make it happen.
But I think it's fun, if you had a bad relationship with your ex, you can just delete the memory, and then you have forget. You don't need to cry. It's just okay. Ask somebody, can you just delete this memory, and go on, and you don't need to undergo these things.
Not too many memories there to delete. But they talked about some of these concepts like in Westworld. So I'm not sure if you've seen Westworld, the TV show. It's on HBO. Yeah, it's about robots and AI and how they interact with humans. In one of the latest seasons, the AI essentially, looks like a human, right? There's probably more human than human, and given that they have sort of free will and a lot of that. But what she said is that as they were deleting memories for her, because they were trying to punish her, right? They were deleting her memories, and essentially those memories are what makes her her, because over time, really, she could back herself up a lot. She could store and download her AI every time again. But the culmination of what makes her name is Dolores, Westworld. Dolores is Dolores because of all the experiences she had throughout her, AI life. All the experiences she's interacted with other people in the theme park of Westworld, and on the online interactions they've had. And you always continue to be someone else when you're adding more memories. You can need to be someone that's either grown or different, or something different about you with every second that passes when you interact with other people, so other things. So to delete those memories might become more and more, taking what's made you over time. And once you start there, well, if you continue to delete more and more memories, you're no longer yourself in the past. You could potentially be removing your identity in some form. Yeah, I mean, for everyone, I guess it would be great for you to Google what transhumanism is, and if you're interested in more, check out transhumanism.com.au. If you're in Australia, but there's a global movement, so all around the world. So when you Google transhumanism, you'll find a lot of the organizations that are out there you might be interested in participating in. And think about, maybe even joining a political party to make these ideas more mainstream by having these topics talked to by the politicians, because politicians will not do anything until people ask for it, because that's how democracies work usually. And really good to have more people be interested in this topic. And really check it out, and look at life from a physics sort of first principles perspective. A lot of the things we listen to through examples or through hearing stories of what happens, but if we go back to first principles and understanding how the universe works, then I think we'll be able to tackle any challenge that's within sort of a realm of physics perspective.
Thank you very much for joining us.
No, it's a pleasure.
It's mind-blowing. It's really good. It's really good.
It continues to back you up every second, every microsecond.
Yes, that's the reason I'm having a problem with British and Australian accent. So
All right, take care. Have a great day, and look forward to more interactions online.